I grew up in New Orleans. My parents were divorced probably when I was about one. So my whole life has just been step parents, and unfortunately, they didn't get along. My biological parents, and so yeah, I saw a lot of the fighting. I saw a lot of feeling pulled in different directions. My stepdad smoked, so I'd go to my dad's house and, hey, you stink. You need to take shower or whatever. So it was just a lot of issues as a kid that I think kind of set me up for failure when I was a young adult. So yeah, I mean, I had a lot of self confidence issues. I had a lot of abandonment issues, trust issues. And I was afraid of the dark. There was probably not a lot I wasn't afraid of at that point, just because, it was in a broken household. I mean, broken is a strong word, right? Like all the tangibles were there. We were definitely, we were fed, we were clothed, and all that. But it was sometimes hard to feel loved. And going between households where I had half brothers, half sisters, and then stepsisters, like it was just like a belonging. Like, which house do I belong to? So that was kind of tough. And I think, like I said, that kind of set the stage for a lot of issues when I was growing up. So I did grow up in a Catholic household, if you will. I went through Catholic schools in New Orleans. I didn't have any relationship with God in that, none whatsoever. It was very ritualistic to me. It was just, hey, you go and confess your sins to a priest, and hey, if you do this many Our Fathers and this many Hail Marys, you're forgiven of your sins. So it just felt very routine. So yeah, that was pretty much my childhood in New Orleans. And then I moved to Mississippi right before high school, about an hour north of New Orleans. And yeah, so I would say I was even separated from God even further, because now I didn't even have any interaction with the church at all. At least with the Catholic Church, there was some there. It didn't mean much to me, but it was still existing, I guess. But once I moved there, I was just kind of living life for myself, and I was a good kid. I got involved with sports. I was in ROTC in high school all 4 years. And that really helped a lot of my issues with the self-confidence and the fears and all that. I was really just very involved and motivated for that. Fast forward, through that, I went to University of Mississippi, Ole Miss right after with a bunch of my buddies, and loved the school, great experience, but I didn't try much in high school as far as like alcohol or, experiment with any of that. So once I got to college, as a lot of other people's stories, like I just kind of went wild, right? And that just really set the foundation for like drinking and addictions and things like that, smoking cigarettes, like you name it. So yeah, I mean, once I went to Ole Miss for a few years, met my now wife, and we've been married for 17 years, but we met, and yeah, it didn't really, unfortunately, didn't get any better from there. We weren't married at the time, but we had a child together, and yeah, so I ended up dropping out of college. I had a ton of debt, probably close to $30,000. Yeah, I needed to find, a means to an end. I needed insurance and all that. And, in college, I was in ROTC and, planned on commissioning for the Air Force. And all those plans were just like, yep, it's not happening. So I eventually enlisted in the Air Force. And that's when things really started to take a turn for the worse. I mean, I was, great in my career field, a great technician, great airman, all of that, winning awards. But man, like that alcohol really started to really hold a lot of power over me. And unfortunately, in military, everything is just kind of like that's the culture is drinking. It's you're getting in trouble, you're drinking after. You got an award, you're celebrating, you're drinking after. Like there was just really no other option. Like that's just kind of again, that's the culture to it. So yeah, my first duty station was in Oklahoma City, and that's when, a lot of my buddies and we would drink on the weekends, but it was a problem, but it wasn't that big of a problem. It didn't really have a true, I guess, foothold on me yet. But once we moved to Japan, man, it ramped up from there. And that's when it was really, it was getting bad. Like it was getting bad for my wife. It was getting bad for my kids. Every Friday, every Saturday, without question, I'm getting just almost blackout drunk. And then it started getting to like where I was doing it during work days. I mean, embarrassing to say, like I would drink and then wake up 6 hours and go to work and show up still messed up, you know. So that addiction just had such a big hold in my life. But before we moved to Okinawa, Japan, um, that's where I did find a church there. You know, that was my first true, I guess, taste of God's presence and his blessings. And, and I'm so grateful for that. It was a church out of Oklahoma City. And that's where I was saved. But, Caleb, it was one of those things where like, yep, I did the motions. I went to church on Sundays. I mean, I even served. I was a drummer for the praise and worship team. I worked security. Yeah, I did so much, but like, I still prioritize drinking. It was just like, that was such a big part of my life. So yeah, I mean, moving to Japan, again, that's just kind of where it got really dark. Like we moved away from our church. We couldn't find a good one there. We tried a few and it was just like, we set such high expectations because we loved our church, in Oklahoma City. And then, we went, I think we were there almost 6 years and we went all 6 years without going to church or anything like that. So, I really made drinking the idol of my life in that season. That caused, that caused so many marital issues. Jamie and I, obviously we didn't see eye to eye on that. I would always try to defend it. I'm stressed or whatever. And it wasn't fair to her. It wasn't fair to the kids. And, luckily, eventually years later, God has really kind of impressed upon me, like, this is something that you have to fix in your life or your life is just going to be crippled forever. And I'm glad, that I eventually listened and, made those changes. But yeah, that I would say as far as the testimony goes, my testimony and what God's done in my life, with that, like, it's changed my outlook on everything. I'm just so glad it doesn't have any power over me anymore. And I give God all the glory on that. It was such a bad addiction. It's just, like I said, every weekend, and as soon as I would leave work, I'm stopping and getting something, whether it be a bottle, and sometimes I drink a whole bottle at night. It'd be crazy. And it was such a hard addiction to break. And we moved to Tucson after Japan, and, this was so many times after promising Jamie, like, hey, I'm going to do better. I'm going to quit, blah, blah, blah. And then it became a sneakiness thing. Now I was sneaking to drink or sneaking to buy or, of all things to get into. I was like smoking cigars and stuff too. And like, obviously it wasn't conducive to a healthy lifestyle with raising kids and things like that. So, it was tough. It was really hard to get over. And, unfortunately it took, a night where, I was on the back porch with my stepdad and, smoking cigarettes with him, and Jamie confronted me about it the next day, and I just lied to her face about it. Like that, I don't know what you're talking about kind of thing. And it got to like the lowest of lows in my life. And I really just started to lean on God, and my faith, and just to like, okay, like I'm ready for a change. Like I'm ready to prioritize you. I'm ready to prioritize my kids. I'm ready to, not like I didn't prioritize them before, but this was, just in a much different, like more involved way. So yeah, that's, as far as addiction goes, that's my testimony with that. Yeah. And again, I give God all the glory on that. Like without him, who knows? I could be divorced. I could be just dead. I honestly have no idea what that foothold would have done to me. It was bad. So a lot of health issues, it started to just like, man, make the skin look bad, just the true like signs of alcoholism, you know what I'm saying? And I was just so like proud and, to admit like, I don't have a problem, like I'm doing this as a de-stressor, or I'm not hurting anybody, and I would start really making like concessions over it. I'd really start to really try to influence Jamie, which obviously I feel awful about, and just like, well, look at it this way. I could be out in a bar, with other husbands, or at least I'm doing it here in the safety of our home. Just, yeah, like it would get that bad. And it was just, man, I'm just so thankful to be delivered from that life. I really am. So, but the moment with, that I really was just like, yep, like I need you, God. Like I am at the most vulnerable time of my life. Yeah, it was probably a few years ago. We were really trying to make, a lifestyle changes for God and prioritize God. And Liberty really did that for us. Cause even when we lived in Tucson, which was, after Japan, we still didn't find a church. And, we started doing better. We started watching some stuff online. Her mother-in-law is such a huge influence, or I'm sorry, my mother-in-law is such a huge influence in our life. She's just so close to God and so connected to God. And, she would send us stuff all the time. But I would say the moment between my wife and I with the kids, beyond, the incident where, I lied to her face, was just like, she would basically tell me, when I'd bring it up, like I've asked you so many times, I've prayed about this, and there's nothing that changes. You've done nothing about it. And it just hurt me, man. Like it just belittled me. It made me feel like just really worthless. And I know like those words, it wasn't like she was trying to attack me or my character. She was just letting me know how she felt. And that's how I internalized that. I was just like, what am I doing like with my life? Like, and at that point I understood that it was the devil. Like I understood that this was Satan's foothold on me. And if I wasn't going to do anything, this was going to continue. Like I had to make some changes in my life. God wasn't just going to come in and say, I'm going to take this addiction away from you and status quo for you. You just keep doing what you wanted. I know that he wanted me to make these changes in my life. And that was going to be work. That was going to be hard work. And I give him all the glory. I didn't have to go to a rehab. I didn't have to do anything. I just woke up one day and was just like, yep, I don't want to live like this anymore. And that was just a supernatural, like, man, effect that God has impressed on me. Like, it was just like, if you're willing to do the work, I'm going to walk with you in stride and help you. So, but yeah. And I've forgiven myself. I thought that was, and I think a lot of people need to do that too, whether it be addictions or mistakes that you've made in the past. That's what God wants you to do. Absolutely. He wants you to forgive yourself, because it's not just, we're flesh, right? And we do things of this world. And sometimes that, that's not in line with what your wife wants and what your kid wants, but ultimately it needs to be in line with what God wants for your life. And being an alcoholic is obviously not one of those things, and not even close. So I've done some soul searching, and I've had to forgive myself for being, that bad husband in those moments, and that bad father. So, and again, all glory to him. And I praise him all the time for it. And, absolutely love him for it. So yeah, God's intervened in my life so many times, and I didn't realize it until, years later. So, I mean, even as a child, I was almost hit by a car, which kind of sounds like, oh, that's probably not a big deal. But like the way that happened was just, I was walking with my cousins and stuff on the side of a road, and my grandmother called me in. We turned around, and then immediately, right after we turned around, within 5 seconds, a drunk driver came in and just like right where we were walking, swooped in and crashed into a tree. I was practically, not practically, I was drowned. I mean, I started to see where like the black curtains were coming in. I was at a local swimming pool with my brother and his friend, and his friend was just holding me down in the water. And I mean, he was much bigger than me. I might have been like 10, and he was in high school, and being held down and scared for my life. And just, as a child, that's pretty traumatic. Yeah. And yeah, I mean, those walls were coming in, and then sure enough, like they let me up. And a lot of people that I've talked to about that was just like, how did you not have any trauma after that? And I was just like, I don't know, like just throughout life, and it was just like that was a God thing, that was him not letting that be something traumatic because I love to swim, being from Louisiana, I love being on the water. So, um, yeah, I mean, as a teenager. I had a Jeep Cherokee when I was able to start driving. And it was real top heavy, and this was in Mississippi. And one night I was coming home from my girlfriend's, and the roads were real wet, and it was storming, and I ended up flipping it on a turn. Walked away with zero scratches. I mean, nothing happened to me. Um, and one of the and in another story, it's just like, man, maybe you should stay away from driving. But I flipped the same vehicle after me and my stepdad restored this because it wasn't as mangled as the story I'm about to get into, but I mean it was bad off. I mean we replaced the windshield. I mean completely flipped, and yeah, nothing happened to me, no injuries. But the second time I flipped it, I was a senior. And this was actually a few months before Katrina hit in that area. So the bridges are no longer there, but there's a pretty narrow bridge going into New Orleans. They call it the Twin Span. And I was heading into New Orleans from Mississippi. Like I said, I lived an hour north of New Orleans. And yeah, I had, at the time, I had two bald tires. I knew that they were bald. The Christmas before that, I got two tires for Christmas. So for whatever reason, those two that I wasn't able to replace because I was a broke teenager, eventually it popped. So I had a tire blowout on this narrow bridge, and it was pretty traumatic. And I still remember every detail to this day, believe it or not. But since it was a narrow bridge, and I'm in a top heavy vehicle, it hit the side rail of the bridge, and I'm riding the bridge, and I'm over this huge Lake Pontchartrain, and I could either go into the water or I can go back onto the bridge. By the grace of God, I go back back onto the bridge. I flip 3 times, and in mid flip, I'm conscious through all of it. I hear a voice that says "duck," like duck your head. So I do that, and then I grab my head and bring it down with both my hands, and come to find out, if I wouldn't have ducked, I would have died because the top of the vehicle went all the way down to the top of the steering wheel. So luckily, I listened to God that day, and He definitely saved my life. And what's cool about that story too is I believe I saw 2 angels right after that because there was a lot of traffic, obviously, starting to build up because this was one of a few ways to get into the city from the north side. And I get out. I do know that my elbow is busted because of me ducking. So that's my only injury, was just me hitting that window. So I crawl out with one arm. This door is mangled. And I get out, and there's 2 girls there, probably, a little older than me. And Biloxi's about, 45 to an hour away. So I just assumed they were at the beach, because Biloxi has beaches. And they're like rushing to me and asking if I'm okay. And then they have, for whatever reason, beach towels with them. So they give those to me. I wrap up, my injury. And then, man, while I'm wrapping it up, like I look back at them and they're gone. And the nearest car is probably 40 yards, 35 yards away. So unless they were like track stars and sprinted back to their car, which I don't believe that's the case, those were 2 angels there that were there for me that night. That was really cool. And that weekend just got really dark too because, obviously the ambulance came and they are just like treat me for everything. They were just like, we don't know if you're paralyzed. You don't know if you're paralyzed, things like that. So now I'm like in the whole get up, the things around my neck, and I get rushed to New Orleans, which was like another 25 minutes. And they bring me to like a trauma hospital. And it was just like at the time, and this is, this hospital's gone because Katrina basically ruined it. So it was called Charity Hospital. And it was like at the time the number 3, trauma hospital in the whole country because of just the vicinity. It's a, big inner city hospital that they deal with a lot of gunshot wounds and things like that. So this hospital is so packed that they can't even get me my own room. So I'm like strapped to this gurney in the hallway, essentially, with a bunch of other people in the hall. I'm 19 years old. So yeah, I mean, there's a guy at the foot of my bed in a straitjacket, and he's just like, "Hey man, undo these chains or undo these locks." And I see, I'm in and out of it because they hype me up or on morphine and things like that. So I'm in and out of it, and I see a guy. He's getting pushed next to me, and he's screaming. He's like from toe to head. He's just covered in burns. So he was. Oh yeah, it got dark, and because I was in the hallway, my parents and I couldn't have family come in there, so I'm just alone. I'm 19, and besides God saving me and intervening and telling me to duck my head, like a few days later, I get discharged, and it was just like it didn't happen. Like I have no trauma, I have like no major injuries. I had like a few stitches on my elbow, and Caleb, what's crazy about that is, and I asked my dad for the picture, but he couldn't find it. But the Jeep was so mangled, like even the police and all that, and they were just like, I don't understand how you survived this. I mean, it was just like, it went through like a trash compactor kind of thing. Like it looked so bad. And to walk away with just like a few stitches on my elbow was just like, dude, like my guardian angels they were on point that day, man. Like they were really, and yeah, so that was a big one. And fast forward into the Air Force, and I mentioned it, before. I owed so much money. I'm enlisted in the Air Force. I'm not making much money at all. I mean, when you're down there at the bottom, joining the Air Force, like you're not. I think I was making like $800 every 2 weeks. So it was tough, and I had that much debt. And at the time, at that church, they were doing what they called stake your claim. So they would pass out these stakes, and then you would basically write the miracle you're standing for on this stake. And we had ours in our garden, and that was our miracle, was like to be delivered from this debt, like essentially just that we would be debt free. And even with making no money and being in all that debt, like we still tithe, we faithfully, and ever since we started, we haven't, even to this day, we've not missed at all. And that's one thing that like I do tell so many people about when I'm sharing my faith. That was just like, you need to tithe and watch the miracles in your life, because I tell you, man, like within 6 months, it was completely debt free. Yep, I deployed. We saved all the money. Like there was just so many opportunities that were given to me, where it was just like, I can pay this off. I can pay this off. We bought a new vehicle. We paid that off. Like there was just so many cool things, starting from us being faithful with our money and watching God work with it. It was just, I could give you an hour of testimonies just on that, man. So that was another, or another testimony just on God's grace with us and standing for miracles and him answering that. So yeah, also when I was in Oklahoma City, I was sent on a trip to actually Japan, where we would later go a few years. And so me and another guy, we were leaving a bar. We had a few drinks, and we ended up at Burger King of all places. Right after, and but this was on our way to Japan. We stopped at it was in Hawaii, actually. We stopped for the night, several nights. Something on the aircraft broke, so we were stuck there. Poor us in Hawaii. So yeah, I know, what an Air Force story. Tough life. I was given like my own hotel on Waikiki Beach, but anyway, yeah, we're at Burger King, and these two girls come in, and they're belligerent. They're cursing the manager out. They're doing all kind of stuff. And, yeah, so they're asked to leave, rightfully so. And when they're asked to leave, I noticed these two guys in the corner, and they looked a little rough around the edges and looked like they were up to no good. They stood up and followed them out. God told me, like, I still remember here, like, you need to stop. You need to stop them. Like, you need to do something. And yeah, it was crazy because it was just like, man, why me? Like, what am I going to say? Just a lot of those thoughts. But immediately as he spoke to me, I was just given like so much confidence. It was like a supernatural amount of confidence. So I stood up, I followed them out. Sure enough, I find the four of them in an alleyway right behind like this, the kind of like a strip mall. It's super dark. I go over there and like the Holy Spirit just starts speaking through me, man. It was so supernatural and it was so cool. At the time, it was not cool. I was like freaking out a little bit. But, now that I reflect on it, yeah, I ended up saying that I was undercover Waikiki police. And these guys like lose it. And they were just like, wait, what do you, we're not doing anything, blah, blah, blah. And, but when I walked up, I mean, they had their hands on her. Like, so like, I truly believe, I intervened in a rape there, maybe a murder. And, I was just talking to Jamie about that a few days ago. And I was just like, that was such a cool God thing that like most people would never think like, I need to do something about or have the confidence to do. I mean, like, I didn't know what I was going to say to them. Like, how do I stop these guys? The guy that I was with was just like, man, what are you doing? That's none of your business, And I'm just like, nope, I'm listening, So I went over there, stopped everything. Unfortunately, they yelled at us, the females, because they were belligerent and, what are you doing here? Blah, 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 blah. Like, no, thank you or none of that. And we ended up calling them taxis and then got out of there. So, man, I felt so good after doing that. And obviously stopping the potential rape and murder, sexual assault, but more so just listening to God in that moment, because I don't know if a lot of people would, because it was kind of hairy for sure. So yeah, after Oklahoma, we go back to Japan, and a few years later in 2017, my daughter was born, and God had his hand all over her on that because she was born 6 weeks early. So yeah, she was a preemie, and she ended up being in the NICU for 3 weeks. But before she was born, my wife had such bad like preeclampsia, like her blood pressure was through the roof, like to dangerous levels. So like they're about they're putting plans into place to like resuscitate her. Plans in place. The baby going to be saved? Is she going to be saved? Like, I'm just there, just kind of soaking it all in. And, then it becomes like, okay, now it's go time. It's an emergency. Her blood pressure's going up. We need to get the baby out. So I stand back in the corner of the room and I just start crying out to God. Like, I need you, I need you to save my wife. I need you to save my daughter. And he does. And it's such a cool testimony because, being born 6 weeks early, obviously there's some health complications there. And there was, she was jaundice. She had some issues with her intestines and things like that. But I never, like, once I started praying out to him, I just got this peace over everything, that everything was going to be fine. And, yeah. And, once I give you those pictures and you've seen my daughter, there's nothing unhealthy about her. So we've come so far with that. And yeah, God's presence was in that room. And, he definitely, he saved both of them that day, just because everything the doctors were saying was just going south. It was just not good. I was scared. I was calling my mother-in-law. We're in another country, man. We're across the world. We have no family there. It's just us. I think I was 30 at the time, so fairly young still. We didn't have any really big complications with my other two sons. So this was all new territory for us. And, I remember that conversation like yesterday, stepping in the corner and just kind of watching it all play out and crying out to him. And he showed me his mercy and he showed me his glory and his power. And I was just like, I don't deserve this, the things that I was doing to defy him, my alcoholism, my addictions. And he still made a way, and he showed me his mercy when I didn't deserve it. And again, that's all him. So yeah, that kind of wraps up, a lot of the intervention. But I'll kind of end on my favorite intervention from God was when we moved to Tucson. At that point, I was starting to seek Him, even further. And this was obviously before we moved here and got into Liberty, so I wasn't where I was at today with my personal relationship with God, but I was working on it. And I asked Him just straight up, like, I want to see you. I want to, like, I want to feel your presence. Kind of like those, like, that validity there, like, are you real, kind of things, and that a lot of people, kind of go back and forth with. And, I trusted Him at that point. I've seen so many miracles in my life, but I still wanted more. So He answered my prayer. Like, I was just like, I want to see you. And sure enough, I don't remember exactly the timeline, how many months afterwards. It was only probably 2 or 3, but I want to say the year was about 2022. Yeah. And I went to sleep, and, most people know, like, when dreams are dreams. This was not a dream at all. This was a real vision. And so I opened my eyes, and I'm in, like, this very, like, black, like, state. Like, it wasn't about seeing or not seeing. Everything was black. Like, it was just an infinite space with black, and just like the darkest of dark. And in the distance, I can see, like, a light beam come down from, like, we'll call it the roof, even though there was no roof, but just I saw a light beam that just was, like, kind of breaking the space of it all. And I was so drawn to it. And the colors of it was just like, I can't really put it into like, our own language, because it was just so supernatural. It was a living light. I mean, it was just like the brightest pinks and the brightest purples that you can imagine. But it was moving. It was just constantly moving. And I was drawn to it. And at the time, I didn't know that this was that answered prayer. I was just like, man, what is going on? And I get to that light, and right before I step into it, like, I just kind of look at it, and it's in front of me. And it's constantly moving. Like, there's life in it. And as soon as I step in, like, I immediately fall to my knees, and there's just this immense, immense power and love that, like, it just fills me up. Like, and I'm just, like, sitting there, and I'm like, oh my God, like, what is going on? Like, this is amazing. And it was just such power, and, like, I felt love. I felt forgiveness. I felt like everything about God that we love and we trust, and that we seek in Him was there in that living light. And man, I just woke up and was just so excited to tell people about it. And so, like, just, let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what happened to me. Here's my testimony with this. And I've told so many people that story, and they just like, man, that's amazing. I want that for me too, And, we talk about it all the time, like God's, living light and things like that. And it was just like, I got to experience that. It's funny because I tried to, like, recreate that in a painting like a few weeks ago. It's real bad, by the way. Like, not good at all.
You want to share it?
I mean, I'll send you the picture. Yeah, why not? I mean, I'm not embarrassed about it, but, like, just to give the viewer, like, kind of what I saw. Yeah, it was just a light in the middle of darkness. And it kind of, like, translated to my life a little bit. Like, this is what you've dealt with for so long, but I'm here. I'm here for you, if you seek me, and ever since then, like, things have just gotten so much, better for me with, my personal relationship. So yeah, those were just, and I know I summarized a lot of those, but those were just so many times that God's intervened in my life, saving my life so many times, going through some really traumatic stuff at a young age and having no trauma over it, like, love to swim. Still got in a vehicle a few days after almost dying in it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I know people that go to therapy and things like that. God was my therapy. So yeah, that kind of wraps up a lot of the intervention stuff. But yeah, it's my testimony on all of it, and, getting through life and getting through addictions. And I'm just real proud and so blessed to say that, like, I've never been closer to God than I am now, and I love it. And, I urge so many people, if, they're on that, that struggle bus, and they're walking with God just to trust him. We may not see it today, we may not see it tomorrow, but you give everything to God, and you put everything at his feet, he will answer your prayers. So, yep.
Praise God. It is so cool to see how the Lord works. If Cody's testimony was a blessing to you, I encourage you to watch one of the others on the screen. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. This is the Jesus Shift, where we've got new testimonies every single week. God bless, and we'll see you again next time.